Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 169, I think, of Gaston Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long. We're coming to you once again from the intergalactic headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. And we simply believe, I think, in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. Is it recording? So we have Amy Anderson on the panel today, and we have no idea if this is actually recording or who knows what's going on. So we're highlighting another great organization this week as we highlight the Rice N Beans Ministry. We have Jeff Thomas with us today, and Jeff is director of the program here in Gastonia. Jeff, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
So, Steve, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Jeff is also otherwise known as Pinto. We have a connection through F3 Gastonia here as well, so that might come up or it might not. Who knows? We also have another F3 connection in the room who's hiding behind the camera that we can't see. We might bring that up as well. So, Jeff would like to get right to it, we think, if it's still recording. But first of all, if you can, just tell us a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
Anything you'd like to share.
Sure. Thanks, Dave, again. Again, my name is Jeff Thomas, and so I live in Belmont, and I this coming Thursday celebrate my 32nd wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow.
So it's really cool. Been
Good
together
for
a
you.
long time, and we have one daughter that's 22 years old. So, been here in Gaston County for a very, very long time.
Okay.
So I love it. Wouldn't change anything for the world.
So what do you do when you're not at Rice N Beans Ministry?
Yeah, so I'm in construction,
Okay.
so we have a similar background. And
Right.
so I've been, I've worked for different people, commercial builders and residential builders, for about 35 years. And then I also have a commercial license. And so I've built a lot of things. I've built, big homes, big buildings, small buildings. And a couple years back, in 2019, I got prostate cancer.
Oh,
and so
wow.
that took
I
a
didn't know
big
that.
chunk of my life out. And so during that time, I really just couldn't be out there in the field. I mean, I'm a hands-on guy. I don't like the office. I love to sling hammer and, get myself really dirty and that sort of thing. And so during that time, I had to take some time off. And so I had gone to the cruise that I had for quite a long time, and I said, guys, I hate that all good things must come to an end, but I can't physically be here in the field all the time. And so I started to work those things out. And so anymore, I pick up some small remodel things here and there, some things that are easy to get in and out of. And that's been fine. But I've done this a long time, and it's taken a toll on me too. Believe me that.
Well, we're not spring chickens anymore, are we?
Well, no.
So I had just a quick side question. How did you get involved in F3? Who got you out for that?
Oh, so F3, so we have a mutual friend named Virus.
Okay. Yep.
And
No
so
virus.
I had been serving the Rice N Beans group over in Charlotte. We'll get into that, but unbeknownst to me, so they serve 2 nights a week. They serve on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And so for years, I was volunteering to serve on Wednesdays. Well, the F3 group would come on Tuesdays, so we just happened to miss each other.
And I went a few times.
Did you?
To
Charlotte? Yeah.
I sure did.
And so Pastor Darrell Sutherland, who owns the ministry. And so then when we started to do Gastonia, then I kind of brought all the F3 guys over there because we were like, hey, we're not traveling to Charlotte. We can do this in our own backyard.
Right.
And so Virus was a part of that group, and he's like, Jeff, I'm in. I want to help you get involved. And so he had been after me for years and years and years to get involved with F3, and I'm like, man, you guys are whack. I'm not getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to start at 5:30, and I'm like, I'm not a runner. I'm not going to work out. Well, I was pretty heavy. If you had seen me in my days, I had a big, long, bushy beard. I thought it was beautiful. My wife absolutely hated the thing, but, I looked like a rugged old mountain man, and I had put on a lot of pounds. And if you know from the, from Dred's notes and the things that he's written, we're the 40-pound pogo guy. And I was
40.
that guy, and I was really, really heavy at the time. And, and I was tired of being that way, and if I dropped something in the floor, I couldn't hardly pick it up. And so I said, enough is enough. And so I finally said, Virus, I think I would like to come out. And so we went out on a Saturday, and then I was hooked. I drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And
was that Stowe Park in Belmont? Was
yes.
that the first workout?
Yeah, that was the first one. And it's funny, though, I had known several other guys like Tiger. I'd known him just from our neighborhood for years and years and years. And so I had met a couple of the guys. And, but once I started working out and, getting better and getting stronger and the weight started coming off, you feel better. And so you do it a little bit more and do it a little bit more. And, finally my wife said, I've had enough of this nasty beard. And so I shaved that off. But I'm down about 70, 75 pounds or so, in the past couple of years. But really feel good. Really feel good. I've loved it.
I mean, you didn't know me at all before F3. So, yeah, I'm down 50 pounds since before F3.
Good for you, yeah.
So it's a great group, and the leadership stuff, as and I've seen you really get involved in that as well. So anyway, we could plug, that's a little F3 plug for all you listeners out there, and we can talk about that a little later. But however, we're here to talk about Rice and Beans Ministry, and I'm just because of F3 and because of it's being so close to us here where our office is, I'm familiar with it, but I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who aren't. Sure. So first of all, just what is Rice and Beans? What's the mission? And then we'll get into any more details.
Sure. And I'll tell you a little bit of the background how Rice and Beans got started is from Daryl Sutherland. I've known him for 40 plus years. And so he had begun to serve the homeless community in Charlotte. And he started out with just pulling a wagon uptown Charlotte, and he would have some hot dogs in it. And then it grew to some socks. And so it grew a little bit more from that. And then he realized, we need something more than hot dogs just to keep the body going. And this is where the rice and beans came in. And so the rice and beans, they're full of carbs and full of proteins. And that's what we need to keep the body going. And so as that grew from Tuesday, then it grew to a Wednesday. And they probably serve, they serve a few hundred people each night, each Tuesday and each Wednesday. And so back kind of the cancer part, I couldn't really lift anything for a long time. So I would just go and walk. And Daryl and I had reconnected after so many years doing different things. And, I'd just go walk. And then we would get a few guys from the neighborhood, and they would come and they would serve, and so we had about 3 or 4 of us that were going on a regular basis to Charlotte. And Daryl said, man, you guys need to do this over in Gastonia. I said, I don't know, Daryl. And he's like, no, I know there's a big homeless community over at the tree that you know. And he said, what if you lead that group? And they said, we'll support, everything and help you get going. And so I said, Daryl, let me think about it. I was just not quite going to commit. I said, let me think about that. Because I knew it would be a huge commitment.
Sure,
and I think a lot of people don't realize, how big that is to pull something like that off. And so I had started talking to the few people that helped me lead this thing. Would they be all in? And so one of the volunteers that I have, he is a Sunday school teacher of a church over in Belmont. And he said, let me talk to my group and, see if we can get a couple volunteers. And so after a couple weeks, he came back and said, I have a team. And I said, what do you mean we got a team? He said, no, I have a team. I got us a committed team. And so then we went back to Daryl and said, okay, I think we're all in. I said, we have a team of people. And so we had gone back to this tree down the road, where people hang out and told them who we are. And this is what we wanted to do on Tuesday. And I told them what time we would be there and all that sort of thing. And sure enough, we show up on Tuesday and they're like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I told you we would be back. And so, we served only a couple people that night. We had 14 volunteers. And we had more volunteers than we had people, right? And so I told them, we would be back the very next Tuesday. And sure as day, we came back the very next Tuesday. And the guys were like, man, what are you guys doing back here again? And I said, listen, I told you I would be back. And they said, you'd be surprised on how many people told us that they would come back, and they never did. And I said, let me tell you something. I said, I gave you my word. And so we've been back. And so right at 4 years that we've been doing this, we served the very first week of January 22. We have never missed a Tuesday. And so in the pouring down rain, we set some tents up out there, and we had one guy one time. It was pouring cats and dogs, right? And he's like, "Man, you guys are crazy." I said, "You're right." I said, "You're absolutely right. We're crazy." And so, that's kind of the thing that we've seen is that, you give someone your word, you better stick to it. And especially these people they expect you to be there. And, I was thinking of a story one time that there was a guy that we kind of met along the way, and he was at a totally different location and pouring down rain, and we only served one or two people, that night. It was not many folks out, and he was standing under a little awning. And so we go out there, and this guy's in a T-shirt, and he's just shaking cold. And he said, "Man, you guys have any warm clothes?" I said, "We sure do." And he said, "You got any warm blankets and warm food?" And I said, "We sure do." And he said, "I knew you would come." And I think that's the testimony to
Right.
Rice and Beans is, that we're committed to this thing. And again, we do it every Tuesday. What's interesting too is going into this thing, my wife and I had made the decision that I would devote every Tuesday just for service work. And so I don't get paid for this. There's not a single one of this. I mean, Steve, you and these ladies here, they make as much money at Rice and Beans as I do. And it's not about the money. To me, it's about serving and giving back to your community.
Right.
And I think that's the neat thing that we can all do. You may not be able to take a full day off, but go and serve your community in some way, in some capacity. It may not be the homeless sector that we serve, and it's not just that, and I'll tell you some more about that too, but, there's other areas to serve. Go to a nursing home. You can go to a literacy program. Go take Meals on Wheels. There is something we can all do. Unfortunately, a lot of people wait for someone else to do it.
There's so many organizations too here that are looking for volunteers.
There are.
Yeah.
United Way, they're always looking for volunteers. You got the Meals on Wheels, and there's just so many other programs around. I mean, if you really, I'm not one that has these great sayings, that we have on those walls, but if you want to make a difference, get off your couch.
Yeah.
And that's what I live by, and that's what we do.
So how many people on a typical good weather day, how many people are you serving?
Last night we served 92 people, or 92 meals went out last night.
Oh,
so
wow.
I have a way to count what comes through. Sometimes I don't quite count it as people because someone says I have so-and-so back at the tent, and what we do know is that if they don't leave someone there, these folks' tents can get robbed and trashed and stolen and all of those sort of things. And so, I don't split hairs on some of that.
Sure.
If they say that they have someone hungry back in their tent, I'm going to send a meal out with you. So 92 meals. And interesting, the very first year we did this, we served 2,760 meals.
Okay.
Was the first year. And then last year in 24, we served out 4,327 meals on the streets of Gaston County.
So,
so that's a lot of
almost 2,000 more.
Yes, about 2,000 more. And we've doubled our volunteers. And it takes a lot of people to pull this thing off. So at first, I was getting all the clothes, I was getting all the food, and I have a lot of places that I have to run and gather all this stuff up. And one guy said, why don't you let me handle the clothes? And I said, okay. And so he handles all of that section. We have another guy that he'd been serving for a while, and he said, Jeff, you guys need a nurse. I'm like, yeah, I don't need a nurse. And he said, yeah, my wife is a nurse. Let's see if we can get her to volunteer. And so sure enough, she started coming, and after a time or two, she said, I'm hooked. I'm your nurse. And so, okay. And so, we take care of some minor scrapes and simple burns, and scratches and little cuts, and sometimes some broken hearts too. And we get that also. And we encourage these folks. We really do. It's not just about serving some meals and some clothes. We encourage them to get off the streets. We really do. We have a list of resources that we put in their hands every week. And encourage them through the continuum of care. There's some great information there. And we also serve, so we have two locations that we serve. We serve at the United Way every Tuesday. We start setting up at 5:45 and we start serving at about 5 minutes till 6. And we'll run for 45 minutes. And then we go to the McLeod Center, which is off of Cox Road in Gastonia. And we serve there from 7 to about 7:30, 7:35.
I don't think I knew that. I knew about the United Way. I didn't know about the McLeod Center. I know exactly where that is. Yeah.
So we have two locations there. So we use both of those as resources too. And it's great to see people get off of the streets. We've seen a couple that have, and they've really improved their lives. And, unfortunately, we see the other side of things as well. And it's, the homeless is not easy. I mean, it's tough. Sometimes we're not their best friend out there for whatever reason. But then we have folks that go through and they'll thank you and want to hug you, and they'll tell you sometimes this is our only meal for the day, and that's huge. That's a big thing, that knowing that you were able to provide a meal to someone that really truly was
my
hungry.
Experience with all the organizations I'm involved with, and having two buildings, one here and then one in West Gastonia, interacting with the homeless community. And it is a diversity of reasons why people are homeless too, right? I'm afraid so many of us have this image of, but if you actually spend any time talking to them, you'll hear all these stories, and gosh, it's just interesting. I'll just leave it at that. Can I assume that you're seeing a lot of the same people week to week?
We do. We see a lot of those same faces, and that's sad. It really is sad. I would prefer not to serve anyone out there, and I mean that for the right reasons, but we are
It'd be nice if it wasn't needed, right?
It'd be nice if it wasn't needed, yes. I'm glad that we can. But we do see a lot of new faces, and that's the unfortunate part from both locations. And so we do see that increase. And we do ask around, why are you out here? And sometimes you get the answers, and sometimes you don't. And to the point that you also made, as you talk to these people, why are you here? You can see some of the issues. You can see sometimes they're mental, or sometimes they're substance, or sometimes it's just bad decisions. But for us, we don't pass judgment on that. That's between them and God, and I leave it that way.
Sure.
While you're out there, I don't care. But if you're hungry and you need a meal and you want us to pray for you and give you a big hug, or whatever it takes, I'm your guy. But and I think that's the thing that a lot of people have such a negative kind of persona of the homeless. Sometimes we've seen that when these guys have been on the streets a long time, and they may have a record, and let's say they're physically dirty, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
Yeah,
they're physically dirty just from what they're experiencing. Who is going to give them a job?
Right.
And that is the unfortunate thing is, they're caught up sometimes in a little circle, and sometimes we're a little kind of almost like a nightmare.
That cycle, yeah.
That little cycle, and they can't break that cycle. And, we try to help them break that cycle.
So, question I like to ask is, you've been doing this now 4 years almost. What is there an example you look back of, I don't know, a success story? I'm not sure that's the right way to put it, but families you've impacted,
sure.
Individuals you've impacted. It's just, obviously you may not even know any of these individuals' names in some situation, but just can you share, an anecdotal story for our listeners that, this is an example of why I do this?
Sure. I've got several for you.
I bet you do.
So, and I'll try to leave names out as best I can. But there was one lady that had 5 kids that, we were serving in the Salvation Army parking lot. And she was new to the Salvation Army, and we had asked her, gosh, what are you doing out here? And 2 weeks prior to that, her husband was killed in a motorcycle wreck. And so she had nowhere to go and nothing to do. And so, her and her children, they were coming out to see us, obviously every Tuesday. And this was even around Christmas time. And so we knew that the kids would get nothing for Christmas. So we all went out and bought a bunch of toys, and we had a little Christmas party for her children out there. And so 3 times she was able to get out of Salvation Army and get on her feet. And through some of the volunteers, they were able to help her furnish a home, and they would take her meals, and she got a job and all of these sort of things, and so she was able to get out of that environment.
So you were part of that transitional time period to help her get through.
Yep. And they still come. So they'll still come, from time to time on Tuesdays and get meals, and the kids just come up and hug you, and they'll thank you, and their little face lights up, and all of those sort of things right there make it worth every bit of effort. I would do it again tomorrow.
I'm sure.
There's a guy who was also staying in Salvation Army, and another had bad choices and different things like that, and he was able to get his life together and get some help and get off the streets, and he's got a job, and so he comes every few weeks and he volunteers with us, and we've seen a number of those success stories there. And some of these people, like this guy in particular, he loves to go and give back. He said, because I know how it feels.
Right.
We have a guy that volunteers with us, and he's been serving for quite a long time. He was homeless at one time, and he just stumbled upon us, and that's a whole different story there. But he loves coming to give back so much. He lives in Cowpens, South Carolina, and he drives from Cowpens, South Carolina to Gaston County every Tuesday to serve your community. And that, again, is where I come back to say, you can get out there. If he can come from Cowpens, we can go across the street and help somebody else.
That's a great point. So you may have already answered this question with those couple of stories, but is there anything that stands out that maybe as a broader sense in almost 4 years that you're most proud of accomplishing, or just in the general sense of the work you're doing?
Yeah, well, and part of the some of the greatest stories I find, you may not see in the huge success on turning their life around and getting so much off the street or a job, but I think about a guy. He was a big guy, and we saw him last night, and he came up to us back a while, and he was crying his eyes out, and I said, man, what's the matter? And he said, Jeff, people see me out here every day, and they see I'm homeless, and they see I'm dirty, and they'll look the other way. And he says, they treat me like I'm a criminal. I said, well, let me tell you something. I said, man, you're somebody. And I said, I love you. And I said, you're God's child. I said, you're my friend.
It's all right.
You're my friend. And I said, and I care about you. And I, that's the part that we all miss, is that these guys are human too, and they have feelings too, and that's someone's child, someone's son or someone's daughter or someone's father that you're talking about. And, so that's why.
Yeah. People don't know what to do they?
No, they don't.
We don't know what to do to interact.
Yeah. And I hate to get that emotional, but I see those faces.
Well, that's the point.
I see this thing every day. I see it every week, and these people that come running back up to you. And I think, again, that's the unfortunate part, is we just cast judgment on those guys, and we forget that they're real people. They have feelings. Whether they're doing what you think they should do or not do, or any of those things. They're still somebody, and they matter. They matter to me, and they matter to our group.
And everybody has a story.
Everybody's got a story,
and we don't know what it is. Normally.
And we don't know what it is. But when you sit down like this guy and you hear him pour his heart out, that makes all the difference right there. And that's why I do this thing week after week after week. We had another guy a couple weeks ago, and I said to him, I said, man, why do you come back every Tuesday? He said, because you call me by name. He said, there's a lot of other groups out here that serve. And he said, I've been seeing those groups longer than you guys, but they don't know who I am. He said, but you call me by name. And again, those are very important things to these people, and it's important to me too.
Well, and that's a purely human psychological thing. We love to hear our name called, right?
Oh, they do.
And that's a basic, it's almost like on Maslow's hierarchy. If we can, that's why it's so important. And even our work we do, the relationships we have, man, remembering people's names, that can really make an impact for others.
And I'm about relationships. Yeah. I'm not going to just give you a meal and pass you on your way. I'm gonna chat you up, when you come through, and they really like it, and I get the bigger blessing out of this whole thing. Believe me, I'm the one that's blessed. By the end of the day, I can go home and put my head on the pillow, and I said, it is well with my soul.
So what about the future for Rice and Beans? Is there, You just going to continue doing the work you're doing, the 2 locations, or any plans to expand it or turn it over to somebody else? I mean, what's...
Well, the goal is to one day pass it on to someone else. That person has not stepped up yet, and like you said earlier, I'm not getting any younger at this thing. And, I want to retire one day as well from this. And, we do have some young folks that are volunteering with us, and I would love to see... that's the next generation, right? I would love to see someone else want to step up and carry the torch. It's a huge commitment, but what I find in kind of these days, people don't want to help, and so I hope that there is still that person out there. But so far as the future with us in the area, we want to stay. We want to stay here, and I know there's a lot of change going on in Gaston County, and Lord knows, I hope we do get to stay, and because we do some good things there, and these people aren't gonna go anywhere, and they're there for the long haul as well, and so what we have started doing is, Rice and Beans is not just about the homeless community. So we have befriended a nursing home in the county as well. And so every other month or so, we take a little skeleton crew and we'll actually go and serve the nursing home, because these also are forgotten people.
They can be.
And
a lot of them don't have family here.
They don't.
Yeah.
And they want somebody just to sit and talk with them. A lot of these people, that's their last place on this earth.
Right.
And so we've been able to serve. A couple of the F3 guys have gone back and served back there. And it's really a huge thing. And they're like, wow, and this one guy in particular, and I'll name names when we get off the air, he has said to me, Jeff, I don't want to do the homeless community. It's just not my passion. And I said, I understand that, and he said, don't get mad at me. And I'm like, these things don't bother me. I get it. And so I was telling him about the nursing home, and he's like, I think I'd love to do that. And so we served just last week down there, and he's like, man, this is really cool. So we served 80 people. Every time we go to the nursing home, we serve their staff and everything, home cooked meals, and they have a ball.
Well, that's good. Yeah, because my mother-in-law is in a facility here in town, which is it's a great facility. We've had a good experience overall here, but it's just an interesting journey with a family too, right?
Oh, sure, it is.
So when my wife and I visit, we see those individuals who never have any visitors and just don't have anybody here local.
Yeah,
and it's. So it's just, again, it's one of those things that that's one reason I like the program United Way does. At Christmas, they do the senior Christmas gifts, because that is can be an underserved community.
It is.
It can be an underserved community.
And for us, it's anything or anybody that's underserved. I'm not going to say it's just homeless or this other. If you come to us at any time and you say you're hungry and you want a meal, well, come on, we got you covered. We had this. It's unfortunate. This man and this lady that lived in this car for a long time. And they had, several little chihuahuas in this car, and so we'd serve them and the chihuahuas.
Oh,
so,
wow!
We've served the kind of homeless or unsheltered dogs too. It doesn't matter to us. We got them covered.
So, Jeff, is there something specific with Rice and Beans that I haven't asked that you want to make sure you get across? I mean, before we're finished, we'll make sure our listeners know how to find out more information.
Sure.
We'll make sure we cover that and even volunteer if you need that. We'll ask you what your greatest needs are at the moment. But anything I haven't asked or that you want to make sure you share before we start to land the plane on this episode?
Yeah, sure. So Rice and Beans is a nonprofit. There's not a one of us that makes anything at this. So all the proceeds that are brought in goes right back out, and that's what provides the food. Some of the clothes that we have to buy. We do get a lot of donations.
So mostly individual donations. Are you getting support from the bigger organization in Charlotte, or how or is it
mostly individuals? We do have some. They would be very small corporates. They would be very, very small things, and that's the fortunate part. I don't get to see the dollars come in. I don't want to see the dollars come in. Pastor Darrell can see all that. I just love to come out here and serve, but anybody that donates into the Rice and Beans organization, so you can go to ricenbeans.org, and there is a donate page there, and you will get your tax deduction off of that page. And so it's Rice with an N bean, Rice N Beans.
A-N-D, right?
No, with an N. Rice N Beans.
Oh, gotcha. Right.
Rice
I
N
knew,
Beans.
actually, you know what? I knew that.
.org. And so you can donate there, but you can also go on that site and you can see we have a group that serves in Rock Hill. You'll see the Charlotte site and you'll see Gastonia, and you can read a little bit on each of our profiles there. But yes, those donations that you give, that's what buys all the food and all the supplies. And, we have to have trailers to carry all these things around and tables. And you'd be surprised on how much it costs to pull this thing off every week.
I'm sure,
and so, you can donate that way. If you wanted to come volunteer, we have individuals and we have corporates. We have some schools that volunteer with us. We'll have some churches that volunteer with us. Some of the corporate volunteers, like Morningstar Storage Facility,
okay,
they have a little program that they volunteer a certain time once a year. So they'll bring their staff locally and they'll serve, and so they give us a little storage space. But GSM, if you wanted to round up 5 or 6 people and just go serve, we would take that. And so when you go onto the Rice N Beans website, you'll see on the Sign Up Genius we use also, sign up to serve Gastonia, and you can just put how many you're bringing. I don't need to know all. If you bring 5 or 6 or 10 people, I don't need to know all 10 names, but sign up on the Sign Up Genius. So it helps us prepare.
Sure.
So, we do have a big volunteer group that comes. They're coming every week regardless. But what happens is when we get those big groups, I tell our volunteers, step back, tell them what to do, step back and let them serve, and we're happy to
How
do
many
that.
typically volunteers do you need? What's the ideal number?
10 is the max, because we have our people that that don't sign up with the Sign Up Genius. So we'll have at least 20 volunteers. So what I don't want to have is, say, 40 people show up out there, because I may not have something for all 40.
It's also limited space, too.
It's limited space, and I only have but so much we can do. And so I don't want that person to stand there and think, gosh, I just wasn't used, I'm not going to go back. And we have a few of the guys, like when F3 came out, there was a lot of people and things to do. And but a few of our guys said, hey, we just want to chat. We just want to walk around and chat. And so thank goodness you get some of those that just want to say hello and, give someone a hug and, ask anything that you need prayer for. And, you want to just chat about whatever, and they're happy to do that. So there is something that you can always do. You can always say hello.
Absolutely.
And we forget that too. You don't have to just stand around. But if you want to volunteer, riceandbeans.org, find the Gastonia section on there and sign up.
Yeah, I found that and saw a great picture of you on the site.
That was pretty scary. I need to update that one, right?
No, it was good. But no, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes, how to get that done. So, Jeff, I appreciate the work that you're doing, but before, something we like to do before we finish these episodes is maybe a couple personal questions and tie into why Gaston County. This is a podcast about good things happening in Gaston County.
Sure.
We're trying to point that out, but kind of a real quick first question for you is, can you share something is there something that very few people know about you that you'd like to share?
Oh, gosh.
That may not have been on the questions we sent you. That's why I asked it.
No, not really. I mean, I'm kind of an open book.
That's not a fair answer. This is like we're in the COT and you've got to share something.
I do like to sing. I was in choir at our church for a long time, and I've not made that known to the.
So, do you have like a go-to karaoke or something that you would break out?
No, not really. I'm a great shower singer, around the house, and my wife is like, "Will you please stop singing? I'm so tired. I'm so tired of this, But I'm a big music fan. I love all genres of music. I'm I'm the child of the '80s, so it's either old '80s hair band rock and roll to some heavy metal, to Southern gospel music, it's just whatever. Something's always going on. But I mean that's kind of.
Well, we'll let you break out the song on the next episode.
There you go. I'll bring the earplugs for you.
How about a recent book, blog, article, website, just something that we might recommend, podcast besides this one, which is the greatest podcast ever, something you might recommend to our listeners?
Well, yeah, obviously this podcast, but there's some great books out there. There's and great facilities too. You know, if I could just tell you, look up some of the places like Charlotte Rescue Mission.
Okay.
They do some great work over there, and I really like that format that they do. Also, another one in Atlanta is called City on a Hill. That's run by a guy named Bruce Deal. And the neat thing with these places, and he's written a book also, and you get a little bit about the homeless, how he got started. And he did the same thing that we did. He just started serving on the streets, and then he had a chance to buy a building, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And he's out of Atlanta.
Okay.
And
seems like I've seen a documentary or
there has been.
Heard him on a podcast a few or something. Yeah, I think I've seen something about that.
There has been, and so those are neat things. If I had a magic wand and I had unlimited funds, I think Gaston County needs something like that. We just don't have that kind of facility here. A place that we can help get the folks off the streets, treat their addiction, whatever it may be, and then teach them a job skill as well, and then kind of walk alongside them and help them transition back out into the streets, and that's what we don't have, but I think that's something that is desperately needed in this county.
Okay, well, that's great. That's a great point. So, Jeff, remember this is a podcast called Gaston's Great for a reason. It's highlighting good things happening around Gaston County. So, from your perspective, besides rice and beans, why would you say Gaston County in general is such a great place?
Oh my gosh. I love Gaston County. And I think just growing up and being in the area, you come to deeply fall in love with your county. And then also the people. And I love being downtown, and I love being with these people. And, you get to go out and through the community and shake hands and, just being a part of that community. And again, that's just a neat thing for me. And, I don't tout the horns of Rice and Beans, and I never try to seek applause. I've seen too many times
where the work speaks for itself.
The work speaks for itself, and I let it do that. And neat thing, back to the one point. What is the one thing people may not know? And in 24. Because of the work, and I give this credit to, first of all, God, but then to our team as well, I was voted Gaston County 2024 Humanitarian of the Year Award. And so those are great accolades that I would have just never thought, and I've told very few people actually know that, so I've gone and just hung that up on the wall, and I look at it and that's just to recognize this, again, it's for our group, that do the great things.
Well, those things can bring more awareness to what you're doing too, though, right?
They can.
And more people involved, more serve more people. So your humility is just the type of person you are, and I appreciate that. But occasionally, it's okay to tout that a little bit just for the mission, for the purposes of the mission. So, but it seems. It just seems a little strange, doesn't it, to do that?
Well, it does, and when they called me up on the stage, they had asked me to speak at this event, and after I spoke and someone else got up and spoke, and, they said in the 2024 Humanitarian of the Year for Gaston County goes to Jeff Thomas. I was looking around for him. I was like, oh, man, that's me, And honestly, I could hardly walk across the stage. My legs were weak, and it was like, this is ridiculous, but I could hardly get across the stage. But that's a really cool thing, and I'm super proud of that. But I try to be very humble as well.
Well, that's why the work. That's who you are. That's why the work you're doing is successful for that very reason. So, this last question I love to ask, and hopefully we've got some young listeners out there. Hope we've got some young people who are like, wow, he's doing some great work in the community. So, knowing what you know now, Jeff, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Go out and serve. Yeah, because I see so many young folks. They're caught up in devices and sports and things like this too, and life is much bigger than that. Life is about what you sow back into your community. Sports are fine. You can have the balance from all of those things, but you need to get back out and support your community, be a part of. And I wish I had done this many, many years earlier. I wish I hadn't waited so late in life to go out and serve and do these things. But, people need you, and it truly changes my life, and also the lives of everybody else. If you go out there, if you're volunteering on a regular basis and it doesn't change who you are, right, then sometimes we need to sit back and, take another assessment of our lives, but I have so many of our volunteers are like, we love to do this. It's made a huge impact on me. And that would be the advice that I would give the young folks is it does make a huge difference in your life. Seeing that smile, connecting with that other person, it's powerful. It's powerful being a part of something bigger than yourself.
Something that I often, over the previous 160 plus episodes, when I asked that question, oftentimes that leads to this short discussion about perspective and not having that perspective on life in general when you're young. Because I know I didn't, for sure. And I know I'm afraid at times it takes just age and experience to get that perspective. But what you're talking about is younger people would go out and do this. It would help them get some of that perspective sooner, right? And understand, frankly, how good we have it here in the United States in general. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's issues. There's our county, our city has things we can always improve on. I personally have things I can get better at, but having that perspective, I do think, helps. And
sure it does.
That's a great point.
And we live in a little bubble. We think our lives are just so perfect, and we can come home to a nice roof over our head and food on our tables and clothes on our back. But what about the other guy? They're still there. They're still human too. And how can you help? And I think, we get busy in our own little lives, and we forget that sometimes.
All right. So, Jeff, this has been terrific. I have personally seen the work that you do. I've got to know you well enough to know the type of person you are. So I'm grateful. Gaston County is better because you are here and the work you're doing. And I think we've already shared, how our listeners can find more information now, how they can donate, how can they sign up to volunteer, or any organizations out there. So is there any last words that you want to share before we close this episode out?
Again, just something we talked about is, just go out there and serve. Serve your community. Each person that's listening to this thing or watching, however you are, you can serve in some capacity. Right. Just find something that you like, and you may try something. If you don't like it, try something else. But go out there and serve somebody. You can help make the world a better place, and that's what I intend to do.
That's a good point too. About you mentioned someone who was maybe not comfortable with the homeless, but they were great going to the nursing home, mm-hmm. right? So there's so many opportunities, and I'm going to toot the horn of Gaston's Great a little bit. Something that we didn't realize might happen when we started this. If you want to learn about other organizations, the other nonprofits, and the work that's being done in our community, just look at the list of episodes of Gaston's Great, and you will see all these organizations that are doing great work, so you can find that opportunity.
Sure.
We didn't have this. I didn't have this concept, or couldn't envision that we might be a clearinghouse for information for people but we've shared, our link with so many people who were asking, what can I do in the community? Can you tell me about this one? I said, well, go listen to episode number 121, and you can find out. So to your point, there are so many ways that people can find something that either interests them or they might be more comfortable with. And it also, I think so many people, my experience is they think it takes some big grand thing, right? Mm-mm. It doesn't Mm-mm. take, it might be just a one Tuesday evening, a week, or just a couple of times a month to make an impact and make a difference. Is that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a young man in our neighborhood that he needed some service hours for Scouts. And, he came and got his service hours, and now he's coming on a regular basis. And so, we can certainly carve out a little time through our busy schedules. And, if it's once a week or once a month, whatever it is, you can find the time to go out there and serve. And so, that's the thing that I continue to talk about and preach out. Just go serve somebody.
Right. Well, I appreciate
you can do that.
Ultimately, that's a great message. And ultimately, the message that keeps a county like ours, being great, right? Yeah. And so I appreciate that very much. I'm going to finish off with my thought for the week, like I used to do every single episode, but I kind of got away from that some. But I think this one, I picked this one on purpose. It's the one I've shared this week here at the company and on my social media that I get on there once a week to do something. But I think it ties into what Jeff does and the work he's doing in the community. But Benjamin Franklin said, "Well done is better than well said."
Right.
So I just love that quote, right? Because, it's kind of like, don't just talk it.
That's right.
Right? You got to go out and do it. At some point, you got to take action to make something happen. So
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. And please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast. And don't hesitate to contact us here at the email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. So please follow us on social media platforms. You can also, good gracious, and as Amy or Rachel normally reminds us, give us a good 5-star rating. If there was a 6-star rating, Jeff, this would be like all or nothing but 6 stars. But that helps us get noticed. Thanks again to Jeff for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you today by Amy Anderson and Rachel Cowart from GSM Services. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.